Um, it's called To Be Present versus Being Connected. My older brother, he's a youth pastor at Emmanuel Church of God. And he gave a preaching a couple of weeks ago, and he said something that impacted my life and kind of led me to dig deeper and ask God to really minister to me by this phrase. What he said was, we need to stop worrying about being present, can't even speak, and stop worrying about being connected. And that's why I wrote, God guided me to write this message. So I named it To Be Present versus Being Connected. El tema que le puse al mensaje de hoy es el estar presente al estar en contra del estar conectado. And I went into the dictionary and I digged up the definition of present and connected. And for present, it said to be physically in a moment or a period in time as intermediate between past and future, meaning now. As we are right now, we're here in the present. Now, what happens 10 minutes from now, we don't know. So we're here right now. And then I went into finding out what being connected meant. And it's to be united or to be linked to a person, especially one of influence or importance, with whom is associated by kinship or common interest. So, when I was writing the message, I was like, why did it impact me so much? Why did that phrase hit me so much? Be present, don't be present, be connected, not be connected. And when I was writing and I was praying about it, it took me back about 2 years ago, before I came back to the church and all that stuff. And I was thinking to myself, why in all those times, everybody knows I'm a pastor's daughter, but when I left the church for over 5 years, I did the partying, did the drinking, did the boyfriends, did all of that. And I used to think to myself, why didn't I feel there in that moment? Why didn't I feel like I was part of it? Why didn't I feel like I was connected to them? Why didn't I feel like I was connected to my friends? And why didn't I feel like I belonged in that place, in that moment, in that time? And after I came back to church, and I started coming here, and I started, bringing my life around, turning my life around. And then when I got to this verse, and when I got to this phrase, it all made sense. And it ministered in my life that the reason why I never felt like I belonged where I was doing. I never felt like I belonged part of the party, and I never felt like I belonged in that sense, in that time of my life. It's because I was never connected to that. Where I came from was way bigger than that bond and that connection that I had. So pretty much, I was there, I was partying, I was drinking, whatever the case may be, but I was just there. So my connection wasn't there. And when I thought about it, I was like, regardless how far I went from God, and regardless how deep I fell, it still made sense that something was missing in my heart. Something was missing that it never allowed me to feel fully connected to the Word. And when I bring it to Daniel, when I was reading about Daniel, it shocked me when I connected the phrase to Daniel, a young man of God that really sacrificed himself not to get contaminated with all the food and the wine and the things that were being taught in the house of the king. And it says that he purposed in his heart not to get contaminated. And in my connection to the phrase to Daniel, it allowed me to see the fact that how do I explain it, break it down? his connection to God was not allowing himself to get contaminated with all the stuff that he was being offered. So meaning that if he would allow himself to eat the food of the king, drink the wine of the king, sit at the table of the king, it would have taken him from having a connection to just being there. And when he said to Ashkenaz, I think that's how you say it in English, he asked that he didn't want to eat and he didn't want to drink the wine, and he asked for something different. He asked for water and lettuce. And he also then, if we keep reading ahead, he also then talked about and said, for Ashkenaz to test him and the 3 other guys that were with him, and for 10 days, and allowed him after 10 days to judge them to see which one of them looked better. And when I go back to him and I kind of connected in my life, it kind of, I was like, why was it so easy for me to allow myself to pretty much disconnect from God and try to find another way to fulfill that connection? I was born in a Christian family. My parents are pastors, and growing up, I must say, I've been through a lot of things in my life, whether it's good and bad, and it's nothing been more difficult for me than being a pastor's daughter. And not in a bad way, in a good way. It's a blessing, it's an amazing thing to be a pastor's daughter, it's a ministry, but it's also very hard, and it kind of can mark you for the good or mark you for the bad, whether it depends on how connected and how deep you're in it. And there were so many times that I used to be like, okay, I gotta be good, I gotta be good, I gotta be good, because people are looking at me, and when they look at me, they look at my parents, and when they look at my parents, they're like, why are they being taught at home, and why are they gonna come down on their church if they can't control their daughter? And I was always in my house kind of like black sheep of the family. I was the one that was always the rebellious one. My mom said blue, I said white. My mom said black, I said yellow. And my sister always used to bicker with me because she was the good girl. She was a goody-goody. She went to school, she did this. She was the good girl, never talked back to my parents. And when I left the church when I was 18, everybody used to be like, look at Sardis. Sardis in Area. And when they said in Area, everyone was like, oh my God, she's in Area. She's the pastor's daughter. What is she doing? What happened? Where did the parents go wrong? And it took me many years it took me a while to realize that what I was doing was not only affecting my life, but it was also affecting my parents' life. And I felt like when I was being raised and when I was growing up, and this is not in my message, so I don't know where this is trying to go, I don't know where God's trying to go. When I was growing up, I used to tell my parents, and I'm like, I go to church because you want me to go to church. I go to church because I have to go to church. I'm the pastor's daughters. I have to be at church. I can't stay home. But I never really went for myself. So I never really found that commitment and that connection and that one-on-one with God when I was younger. And when they turned over the church and they decided not to be pastors anymore and just to lead their ministry, I stepped away, and I kind of looked at it as a way out, and I was like, okay, they're not pastors anymore, so pretty much I can do whatever I want. And I left for about 5 years, and I always told my mom when I came back, and I think for my parents every single day, and I don't think I would have been here if it wasn't for God and for them. And I tell her every time, and I'm like, I've never fallen so deep in my life. I've never been through so much in my life than the time that I stepped away from God. And, A lot of people, I've done a lot of things in my life. I didn't kill anybody. Don't go getting ideas. But I did a lot of things in my life. I did a lot of things, and some good, some bad. But I had jobs left and right. None of them worked out. I went to school. I used to get bad grades. I came to church. I was like, whatever. And I remember I came here about 2.5 years ago, and the only person I met was Rafi. And I remember I sat down, and they came, they preached, I cried, I left. Came again, they preached, I cried, and I left for about 2 years. And then last year, when I started coming back, and it came back right around the youth campaign last year. I remember Adolfo preached, and I don't even remember what he preached about, to tell the truth, I really don't. But I remember I cried my eyes out, and I was like, you know what, I'm tired, and I just told God, I'm tired, I'm going from job to job, I'm tired from going to place, I'm tired of being mad at my parents, I'm tired of coming to church and you're not speaking to me. And when I came to the front and I gave my life to Christ again, I was crying. God told me, you belong with me. And I remember in that time, in that moment, I felt like I was back home. But not because I came back to church. And I promised myself I wasn't going to cry. Not because I came back to church, but because I came back to that connection that I want to have with God. Because I used to come to church, and sometimes we sit in the church, and sometimes we're here, but we're not really here. And sometimes we're just here, and sometimes we're just taking up a seat. Because, like I said, sometimes we're just present. A veces solamente estamos presentes en la iglesia, llenando una banca, llenando un asiento, pero en realidad no estamos conectados con Dios, no estamos conectados con lo que tiene que ver la presencia del Espíritu Santo. And when I came back and I started coming back to church, and I started, taking advice from pastors, and I started to get everybody. I started to realize that my life meant absolutely nothing. And Sardis meant absolutely nothing without that connection with God. And I always tell my mom, and I remember a couple of services ago, when Caitlin and Geraldine put the service about I Still Believe. And I remember Geraldine gave her a testimony. And she said that every time she touches her elbow, she remembers what God did for her life. And that elbow, every time she touches it, she reminds herself what God did to her. And for me, every time I look at my parents and everything I see that has happened within a year and a half, I'm like, how can I ever lose that connection? How can I ever go back to just being there, another one, a number, and not being connected to God? And when we go back to Daniel, and if you keep reading verses ahead and story of Daniel, and how he was put with the lions and stuff like that. But what really, really, really amazes me about him is that I'm very ashamed, and I'm not even trying to hide it. Sometimes I'm like, do I really need to say I'm a Christian to everybody that's around me, or should I walk into a room and be like, hi, my name is Sardis, I'm a Christian?